Hi everyone, welcome back. So let's continue our Eon topic. So let's continue with the new series, and I guess this is one is the last series of this Eon topic. So let's see what the series hold for us. The legislations itself wouldn't require us to make objective judgments about a people's attractiveness. So let's see what this series hold for us. Let's start with the four spaces. Perhaps legislations against indirect discrimination, that is, against policies and practices that unintentionally affect people with a protected characteristics in a negative way, is enough to criminalize much appearance discrimination in hiring and promotion decisions, providing an unutilized way of combating it. Suppose that appearance norms and dress codes are biased against people with tightly coiled hair, or with darker skin tones, or with asymmetrical faces or bodies, or with wrinkly skin, or against those who see it as part of their religious duty to dress modestly, or against the women who object to being required to wear makeup or heels, then selecting a people on the basis of their conformity to these norms or their willingness to conform to them will stand in need of justification in any legislative scheme that requires indirect discrimination on ground of race, sex, disability, age, or religious to be a proportionate means to a legitimate goal. But it is not clear that legislation against indirect discrimination is enough to deal adequately with the moral challenge posed by lookism in employment. So let's deep down this whole passage. Let's start with the four sentences, what this trying to say. Perhaps legislations against indirect discrimination, that is, against policies and practices that unintentionally affect the people with a protected characteristics in a negative way, is enough to criminalize much appearance discrimination in hiring and promotion decisions, providing an unutilized way of combating it. So this sentence is trying to say that there is an indirect discriminations going on because of some policies and practices which unintentionally affect the peoples, and which we also consider as criminalized manners, because this is unintentionally promoting the things which are biased. So let's move to the next sentence. Suppose that appearance norms and dress codes are biased against people with tightly coiled hair, or with darker skin tones, or with asymmetrical faces or the bodies, or with the wrinkly skin, or against those who see it as a part of their religious duty to dress modestly, or against a woman who object to being required to wear makeup or heels. So this says that there, if some dress code is given to the people, because to the people, sometimes they consider it as indirectly way not fair to themselves, just like a dress code is given to the people, to the women who just because of the religious issue they are hesitate to wear that, and enforce a woman to wear a makeup and heels. So that's kind of activities unintentionally biased to them. Then selecting a people on the basis of their conformity of these norms or their willingness to conform to them will stand in need of justification in any legislative scheme that require indirect discrimination on the ground of race, sex, disability, age, or religion to be proportionate means to a legitimate goal. So these kind of this what this sentence is trying to say that because of these peoples who just put objections against following certain rules which indirectly discriminate peoples because of their race, sex, disability, age, and religion. They then, in that case, they need justifications from legislative because indirectly it is unfair to them. If they are not comfortable, that means they will not gonna do that. It is not clear that legislations against indirect discrimination is enough to deal adequately with the moral challenges posed by lookism in employment. So, this sentence is saying that it is not clear that legislation against indirect discrimination is enough to deal with adequately with the moral challenges posed by employment. If we legalize these things, which is indirect discrimination, still it is not sure that there is justice happen in the job market because of lookism. So what the title should given to this whole passage is indirect discrimination. And what we can take from here is policies and practices that unintentionally affect the people with a protected characteristics in a negative way. Selecting a people on the basis of their conformity of these norms will stand to need justification in any legislative scheme. Not clear that legislation against indirect discrimination is enough to deal adequately with the moral challenges posed by the localism in the employment. So that's all for this passage. Just moving toward the next one. My proposal would be this: we make it illegal to reject a person on the basis of their appearance or particular appearance related features when no plausible case can be made that these features are qualified for the job in question. When possession of them can't even be seen as a way of conforming to a company's ethos and attracting its customers or clients, we could add to this the requirement that reaction qualification, that is a qualification that rely on the responses of the customer, shouldn't be given any weight if they rest upon customer prejudices about an appearance feature, where prejudices are generalizations or associations that aren't sustained by the publicly available device. And we could make it a presumption that when the background culture is infused with these prejudices about a particular appearance feature, then reaction qualification related to the feature should be regarded as illegitimate unless evidence can be produced for thinking that customer preferences for it are unconnected to such prejudices. So what is that passage is trying to say that? My proposal would be this: we make it illegal to reject a person on the basis of their appearance or particular appearance related features when no plausible case can be made that these features are qualification for the job in question, when possession of them can't be even seen as a way of conforming to a company's ethos or attracting its customers and or clients. So here, straightforward, straightly, what author is trying to say that it should be illegal if anyone judged by their appearance and the features for any job qualification which is not mentioned by the company itself, then it should be considered illegal to reject a person on the basis of their appearance. We could add to this the requirement that reaction qualification, that is, qualification that rely on the response of customer, shouldn't be given at any weight if they rest upon a customer prejudice about an appearance features where the prejudice a generalization or association that aren't sustained by the publicly available evidence. So here author is trying to say that it is not considered as any qualifications, whether it is a reaction qualification or what, that if the company is not able to present any evidence that this skills or this appearance or the features of somebody's is considered as qualified or a qualification criteria because of the customer preference or what. And we could make it a presumption that when the background culture is infused with these prejudices about a particular appearance feature, then reaction qualification related to that feature should be regarded as illegitimate unless evidence can be produced for thinking that the customer preference for it are unconnected to such prejudice. So here author is trying to say that even the same thing which is just said in earlier sentence, that it should be considered as, means that thing doesn't make sense if you can't just provide the evidence of that you are preferring someone because of the customer preference, because they are not set up according to the customer preference. So what the title should given to this pieces is that the qualification according to the customer preference. No, the prejudiced customer preference. That's the title given to this pieces. And what we can take from here is that no plausible cases can be made that these features are qualification for the job in question when the possession of them can't even be seen as a way of conforming to a company's ethos attracting its customer or clients. And when the background culture is infused with these prejudices about a particular appearance features, then reaction qualification related to that feature should be regarded as illegitimate. That's all for this passage. Let's move into what the next one. So, maybe spectacle about whether legislation against lookism could be effective with good reasons. Part of the problem with legislation in this era is that there is likely to be a resistance to making use of it. Who wants to admit that others regard them as unattractive? Furthermore, appearance discrimination can be hard to detect and monitor. The legislation itself won't require us to make objective judgment about people's attractiveness. We just have to know that selectors have been influenced by the candidate's appearance or by the particular appearance features they possess. When these have nothing to do with their ability to do the job, but we do need to be able to monitor different companies to see whether there is any reason to think that they aren't complying with the legislation. With race and gender, we can examine percentages in the workforce are selected through the appointment process. But how can we do that in relation to an attractive appearance? So, what the author is trying to say here is that some may be skeptical about whether legislation against lookism could be effective with good reasons. So, here, author is pretty confused or not sure that if we legalize law against lookism, will it affect in a good reason? Why he's thinking so? Because a part of the problem with legislation in this area is that there is likely to be resistance to making use of it. Who wants to admit that other regard them as unattractive? Here, author has just pointed out the problem, just why it's not working that efficiently, because because nobody wants to admit that other regard them as unattractive. That nobody can directly go and say that, see, though that person is telling me or considering me as unattractive. That's the problem. Nobody is here to confess that. It is it is a deal, a big deal to just get the person to admit the things. Furthermore, appearance discrimination can be hard to detect and monitor. The legislation itself won't require us to make objective judgment about people's attractiveness. So here another problem is that the appearance discrimination is hard to detect or monitor because objective judgment can't we take it as consider it. We just have to know that the selectors have been influenced by the candidate's appearance or by the particular appearance features they possess when these have nothing to do with their ability to do the job. Just how we can just make this point, because how we can judge the selectors, because we thought that maybe the selectors is influenced by the candidate appearance, which is not mentioned or not required for doing any job. But we do not need to be able to monitor different companies to see whether there is any reason to think that they aren't complying with the legislation. So what here author is saying that they're not able to monitor different companies, that they are not following the legislation rules, because these things are quite complicated to get evidence of. With race and gender, we can examine percentages in the workforce are selected through the appointment process, but how we do that in relation to attractive appearance. So, furthermore, discussing about the problem, author is saying that in case of race and gender, we can somehow just get the percentage, somehow get to know that here is the discrimination plays a role, because we have the numbers or proportion of the races, how they are appointed, how much candidates are from different gender and the race in the organizations. But it is hard to just judge any company that they are not selecting the candidate because of the attractive appearance. So, what the title given to this passage is Problem with Monitoring Attractive Appearance Case in Companies. And what we can take from here is that both the first problem we just find out. The first is who wants to admit that others regard them as unattractive? The first problem. Another, the legislations itself won't require us to make an objective judgment about the people attractiveness. And with the race and gender, we can examine the percentages in the workforce are selected through the appointment process, but but we do not in relation to an attractive appearance. So that's all for this passage. Let's moving toward the last passage. There is a surprisingly large amount of intersubjective agreements concerning judgments of attractiveness, and it may well be enough to collect the data required for monitoring purposes. So I think that the objection to legislations against appearance discriminations are not insuperable. It is visible and no less desirable than other forms of anti discrimination legislation. But perhaps the main function of legislations against appearance discrimination would be to send out a message to employers and society more generally that lookism is unacceptable, and to give companies a reason to examine their practices and reforms them if they encourage lookism or give it too much space in which to operate. We might even regard it as good practice for recruitment interviewees to be behind the scene, as it's sometimes done when auditioning musicians. In the context of employment, at least, we should combat what Francesca Minerva called the invisible discrimination that takes place right before our eyes. We have been too complacent about lookism at the workplace for too long. So here, what the author is trying to say that there is a surprisingly large amount of insubjective agreement concerning judgments of attractiveness, and it may well be enough to collect the data required for monitoring purposes. So here author is saying that there is how we can get the data monitor this case by in subjective agreement concerning judgment of attractiveness. So I think that the objections to legislations against appearance discrimination are not insuperable. It is visible and no less desirable than other form of anti-discrimination legislations. So here author is saying that objections against appearance discrimination is not that much of a big thing to deal with. They can also easily monitored, which is quite easier to monitor than the anti-discrimination legislation. But perhaps the main function of legislation against appearance discrimination would be to send out a message to the employer and society more generally that lookism is unacceptable and to give company a reason to examine their practice and reform that if they encourage lookism and give it too much space in this in which to operate. But due to all this legislation, what legislation trying to do is that they give an employer and society a clear-cut message that lookism is not acceptable. And if it is, if any company need it, they have to give it a valid reason why they are doing that, why lookism is important in their work. We might even regard it as good practice for recruitment interviews to be behind a screen, as it's sometimes done when auditioning musicians. So here authors just trying to give one idea, just like in selecting or auditioning a musicians, the recruiters or interviews are behind the scene. They are not able to see who is the musician, just what the talents they bring out. They judge them according to their talent, not their appearance. That kind of practices also can done in the organizational's recruitment process. In the context of the employment, at least, we should combat what Francisca Minerva called the invisible discrimination that take place right before our eyes. We have been too complacent about the lookism at the workplace for too long. So, by Francisca Minerva, called invisible discrimination, which is which is take place before our eyes, right before our eyes. There's some here what author is trying to say that it should be regulated invisible discriminations because we are imagining the thing which is in workplace is also lookism, which is invisible discriminations. We want everyone to be a very presentable in our workplace, which is also invisible discriminations. We already have that thought before anything happened earlier. So that shouldn't be done, which is also a injustice or bias. Our thinking also is injustice and bias. So it is also an discrimination, which is called invisible discriminations. So because of that, what here author is trying to say that we also need to change our thoughts. Not just it's not just so come forward with this problem when it's happened with itself only. But we should also, even if you're not the part of this kind of discrimination, if you never been judged because of their your looks, but still they are the people who feel uncomfortable because of this, and we are the peoples who are the reason behind that. That's why it's called invisible discrimination, that we need to change our thoughts, then we are the right person to raise our voice against it. Firstly, we need to change ourselves, change our thinking. That's directly author is trying to say. So with that note, it's we are done with this eon topics. I hope you guys can understand. So as of now, see you with another new eon topic. As of now, have a great day.